Hi, it's Dave. So in this video, I want to talk about the dead end of parenting by rules. I think parenting is a system, and in a lot of ways, every parent has certain beliefs and values that are kind of like the foundation of parenting. It's a philosophy of how you view what is important in raising your children. Out of that foundation comes certain actions and behaviors, and it creates kind of a system, an overall system of how you act and how you behave towards your kids. So the question I think every parent needs to ask is, what type of system are you enforcing, right? And is this manageable? I think a lot of times people don't realize that whatever system that you start enacting, you're forced to actually enforce that system. That's the whole point, where you have to keep it up. The problem is the mainstream view of parenting is a view that we need to parent by rules, and we need to set strict boundaries and borders, and we need to keep our kids in line. And the whole point, though, is with rules, is that when you set a rule, the rule is pointless, has no value unless you enforce it. So in other words, if you create a rule, like your kids can't do this or can't do that, then you need to follow up with consequences. And those consequences usually are either a reward or a punishment. And so now we're going deeper and deeper into a system where we're trying to, in fact, impact, manage, or even manipulate our kids' behaviors by giving them punishment and rewards to dictate their behavior. And it's all an exterior system where we're trying to manage our kids' behaviors and how they grow up through an exterior system of rules and consequences. However, there is a brutal aspect to the system of rules that modern parenting encourages parents to do. And that is, it requires a massive amount of effort to keep up. It's like a flywheel where you have to just put an immense amount of effort to try to always be the enforcer. And that's why I think a lot of parents, they're extremely tired and beat up from parenting, because whenever they're with their kids, they're always feeling like they need to enforce the rules, right? The consequences of do this, don't do that, right? And always having to manipulate, giving punishment and rewards to their kids. In a lot of ways, they feel like they can't just relax, and they're always constantly policing. If they don't police, their kids will go wild. And I really think that this is not how parenting should be or is intended to be. I think there is actually a much better way, and a way where actually it can be awesome. Parenting can be stress-free. It can be an amazingly enjoyable experience. But I think the whole paradigm and approach of parenting needs to be questioned. A lot of times we don't question, right, what parenting is, or that whole philosophy, or even approach, or even the system. And a lot of times we don't question because it's based off of tradition. It's like it's always been this way. You read books on parenting, and all the books say the same thing, right? You have to enforce rules and tell your kids what to do and what not to do, and punish and reward and all this stuff. And what I'm trying to do, though, with all of my videos and with kind of this whole channel, is share kind of my approach, which is kind of resulting from an approach of first principles, where we're asking, what is the essence of parenting? What is parenting all about, right? And what is growing up as a kid? What's the most important things that you need to grow up as a healthy child? And I really think that it's not about necessarily the rules, because in a sense, rules don't really have much value in life longer term. In fact, if you think about the value of rules, a lot of times rules are very restrictive, and they're kind of an exterior system, an external system that we don't necessarily own ourselves. I think it's much better and it's a much higher value to understand principles. For example, you might have a rule with your kids, like don't come near the kitchen or something, and that might be a rule. They might not understand it, and it might, restrict their behavior in some ways, but they don't really own it. A much more clear principle is, for example, fire will burn you, and understand what that means, and understand which appliances or where in the kitchen, right, is the most risk to be burnt. There are different ways where we can add principles, and that adds actually more empowerment to our kids, not to be just have this over-restrictive, fearful view of the world, but to understand through principles, right, it's kind of a decoding of what is in the world. A lot of times I think with principles, we could teach a lot of cause and effect. A lot of times when we have a rule-based system, our cause and effect, if you do this, you will get punished, or if you do this, I will give you a reward. But that cause and effect is an artificial cause and effect, meaning that's not a real world cause and effect out in, the natural world or in real life. That's only a cause and effect based upon your arbitrary rule system and a punishment system that you as a parent brought up. I think it's much more effective and important to give our kids actually a closer alignment to a true cause and effect kind of understanding of how things work. Meaning, when I do an action over multiple time periods or different scenarios, this is going to lead to certain natural impact, natural effects, right? For example, I might say to my kid, hey, yeah, if we punch people all the time over 1 week and 1 month and 1 year, no one wants to be around us. No one wants to be our friend because we're just going to be hurting them. That's a simple kind of cause and effect that's more based and aligned on natural reality versus, hey, if you punch somebody, you're going to get punished. You're going to have a timeout, or all this stuff where that's an artificial kind of cause and effect that needs to be sustained by a rule system that parents have to keep up. Now, I think having a more principle-based kind of cause and effect understanding in a real-world situation, this is actually allowing our kids to own their own decision-making process. It's allowing them to internalize their own system to be able to make their own decisions. And this is ultimately taking off the burden of responsibility, taking off the weight of enforcing from the parents and putting on the kids for the kids to take responsibility for their own actions. Now, the result of all this is, if done right, I believe a principle-based type of approach to align more with the natural kind of cause and effects of our actions and habits and behaviors, it actually will build healthy self-identity. It'll build a sense of confidence that, hey, I'm making my own decisions, and a sense of independence and growth. And I think this is the crux and actually at the core of really building healthy kids. Now, another kind of benefit of kind of this healthy cause and effect based upon real life, right, situations, rather than having an artificial rule system by a parent, is that kids learn to make their own decisions and own their own decisions. They're not acting just because it's a rule that's enforced by punishment or reward. They're not doing this out of fear, right? Out of fear of getting knocked up or timed out by someone in so-called authority position, or they're not even doing it because they're manipulated by some reward. Rather, they're acting innately and intuitively because they understand, right? And that's the key thing. They're acting out of understanding because they understand their actions, how their actions impact themselves and how their actions impact others in this moment, but also over time, right? With over multiple time frames. And I think that's kind of the essence of growing up. It's kind of the essence of making better decisions over time, is you're able to intuitively, internally, right, understand the impact of your actions on yourself and others. And I think we have an immense and a humongous opportunity to teach that to our kids from an early age. But a lot of times we get sidetracked by this whole system of rules, right? And what that kind of, promises to give to parents, which is so-called a manageable, right, household. But a lot of times it's the opposite. It actually hampers and sabotages our own kids' ability to grow up and to take ownership of their own actions. And that's why you have kids that are growing up, they're getting older, but their actions are not becoming mature, meaning they're not owning, right, their own actions and understanding the consequences of their actions for themselves and others, because they've all been kind of hampered or kind of weakly supported by this system of rules, and that's what they're dependent on. They'll only do something if someone is threatening them or bribing them, right, or manipulating them. I think a lot of times the fixation and the infatuation with rules that our current modern parenting has is kind of sabotaging the whole parent-child relationship. The parent-child relationship, I think, is one of the most awesome, sacred relationships out there, and it should be one of fun and support and camaraderie. It should be one that's characterized by laughter and by just having a blast, a freedom and relaxation. And the parent-child relationship should be awesome, right? And on the flip side, though, what's happening in reality is far from that. a lot of parent-child relationships have become one of policing, and it's a relationship of frustration, and it's a relationship of, rather than gaining energy and being fascinated by our kids and enjoying that awesome relationship, rather than that, we get frustrated and we get tired, and we feel like we're just constantly policing, right? Trying to uphold this complex system of rules and telling your kids what to do and what not to do. So I think it all comes down to kind of going back to the basics. What is the essence of parenting? And in order to ask that, we have to ask, what's the essence of human development, right? And a lot of that comes down to, like, we have to teach our kids how to think. We have to teach our kids, right, an own innate, intuitive, and internal sense of what's right, of how their actions impact themselves and others. And we need to teach our kids an identity. They need to be confident to know that, confident in their own ability to assess the world and to understand what they need to do. And I think that only comes not from a system of rules, which I think largely sabotages that whole development process, but I think it comes from supportive, compassionate, empathetic parents who come alongside, who actually help their kids understand, right, consequences for multiple time frames of various actions, and come alongside as a supportive voice, right, to help our kids internalize, right, the principles of understanding, right, this world and how our actions and behaviors impact the world around us. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful. All of my videos on my parenting channel here, they're not meant to be for per se to take one episode as the whole kind of context of the system of parenting. Rather, a lot of my videos are connected to each other, meaning in order to understand a lot of these concepts, a lot of the other videos need to be referenced, and it's all connected, because it's not just a small tweak, I think, that parents need to make, but it's rather a full renovation, a full revamping of our parenting philosophy, values, approach, and our whole system that we're building toward our kids. It needs to be completely reconstructed from a first principle, kind of finding the essence point of view. Anyways, I hope this video has been helpful. It's been fun sharing with you guys just my journey as a parent, and I hope, I wish you guys the best. All right, thanks.